When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
This episode is brought to you by Marshalls, where you never have to compromise between quality and price. The buyers at Marshalls hustle hard, working to bring you great deals on brand name and designer pieces. Because Marshalls believes everyone deserves access to the good stuff. Visit a Marshalls store near you or shop online at marshalls.com.
Broadcasting intimate details and useless information from an undisclosed location in New York City. The Last Show with David Cooper.
When women out-earn their partners, surprisingly, relationships can face strain. It can expose old insecurities hiding beneath the surface in what seem like modern relationships. Joining us is journalist Josie Cox, who recently wrote an article titled "The Plight of the Trophy Husbands," to dig in why when women earn more than men, for some couples, it means trouble for love. Josie is also an author and contributor at Business Insider. Josie, welcome to the program.
David, thank you so much for having me on.
This word gets thrown around a lot, trophy husband, but when you actually go to research this and figure out what that means for people, who is a trophy husband? Is it just a man who's financially supported? Is there something deeper to that label for most people?
I think we're probably more familiar kind of historically with the phrase trophy wife, right? The sort of arm candy, the kept woman, the woman who certainly doesn't work outside the home, who looks after her man. So this is kind of like another take on that. And the reason that I use the phrase trophy husband is because I'm basically talking about an upsetting of gender norms. So traditionally, of course, as we know, in heterosexual couples, women tended not to earn as much as men. Now, that is changing. We're seeing more female breadwinners than ever before in places like the US and other countries as well. We're seeing more women in the C-suite in kind of, top managerial positions, etc. So a lot is changing. But one thing that seems to be resistant to change is marriages and the dynamic in marriages. And I have been fascinated by this topic for some time. So I decided to do a sort of deep dive for Business Insider, looking into what the stats actually show us, what divorce rates actually show us, and why it is still the case, as you just mentioned, that in marriages in which women out-earn their male spouses, divorce rates still are so much higher.
On its face, seemingly progressive people who would outwardly say, oh, it's great my wife earns more than me. Does it affect them too? Is it really across the board here?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, these progressive couples, because so many of the people I spoke to, and I spoke to many for this article, sort of started off by saying to me, we're super progressive. The men were saying to me, I support my wife in whatever she does. I really champion her career. I want her to reach her professional and economic potential. And then at the same time, many of them talked about this elephant in the room, which is the conversation about money. And the extent to which, there's sort of an unspoken discomfort when these gender norms are upset. And some people can't even put their finger on it. They just say that there's more kind of tension in the relationship, that there's some kind of disconnect in communication at times. But something kind of goes awry. And, my job in the article was to kind of figure out what that is. And so I spoke to a bunch of psychologists about it, psychiatrists, couples counselors, coaches, marriage counselors. And without kind of preempting your question too much, your next question that you might have.
No, the question is, sure, people on their face are going to say we don't really know why, but there must be something going on. So What is it? What are these reasons? What's behind it? Is it money? Is it identity? Is it ego? Is it historic cultural norms that we say we don't adhere to, but we still do? Is it all of the above?
Mm-hmm. I think you've actually nailed it. I think it really is all of the above. Of course, it differs from couple to couple. And in certain cultures, some of those factors play bigger parts. But generally speaking, from the conversations that I had, what I established was that it is a case that we are still conditioned by society from childhood, right, from a very young age, to kind of internalize the fact that men are winners and women are homemakers, that that it's sort of their responsibility to economically support a family. And this, of course, doesn't have to be explicit. Like, I'm not saying that we are raising kids and explicitly telling the boys, one day, son, you will go out and you will earn all this money and you will support a stay-at-home wife. That is not what we're doing. But it's everything from like the messages in advertising, the sort of subliminal signs that are in our media, in our popular culture, in the way that we behave around kids. There's plenty of research showing that in the way we parent, we encourage boys to take more risks than girls, right? Again, it's not something intentional. It's not a sort of, a conscious sexism or a conscious bias. It's just the way that we are still conditioned to think about gendered norms and roles in society.
Your article mentions women saying their partners felt emasculated when they earned more. Why do so many men still think that their self-worth is tied to their paycheck? Or even worse, that their self-worth is tied to the fact that their paycheck is higher than their wives?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And what I would say is that not a single man who I spoke to said that they felt emasculated, right? They were not the ones who were using that word. It was the women who I was speaking to. And in most cases, it was the women whose marriages had not been successful, right? So they were talking about their ex-husbands using that word, saying he had felt emasculated and therefore our marriage didn't work out. I think that it is because we as a society still tend to equate money with power, right? Power has to be measured in some way. And I think a neat way of doing that, a neat way of kind of quantifying how powerful someone is, how influential someone is their paycheck. It's a sort of shorthand. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we can debate. And you may well want to.
Well, I mean, I don't know. My ex-wife was a lawyer, and I was always proud that she made more than me. I felt that was the opposite of emasculating. I'm like 2'8", and I once dated a 6-foot ballerina. And when we were in public and she towered over me, I was very proud of these things. I don't know why. I can't fathom that someone would see their partner earning more than them as making them less than. Shouldn't a couple be looked at as a unit and evaluated as such? Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe this is radical thinking.
Maybe this is just like the way it should be, right? Maybe you actually are enlightened and progressive in the way that so many people claim to be, and not everyone is. But it's interesting. I quote one man in the piece, because obviously, one of the things I acknowledge throughout is that there are exceptions to this trend. Of course there are, right? You being a perfect example. And I quote somebody who started off in basically the same job as his now wife. They started dating when they were both working in finance. They were both making pretty much the same salary. There was sort of equity across the relationship. And now she out-earns him by, a factor of 2 or 3. And he does say, that he's really proud of her, that he considers the money that they make collectively as a couple to be this kind of like fungible pot of cash that they can both benefit from. And that's kind of in an ideal world, the way that it should be. But it seems that's not the case.
Those exceptions, like the guy you just mentioned, what's the secret to making this work if you've uncovered it? There must be couples for whom this setup works great, and others it kind of erodes things.
Totally.
What's the secret to making it work?
Well, I think one of the sort of through lines that I found as I was interviewing people was that the couples who had the ability to communicate openly about money and about how they felt about money, the emotions attached to money, the extent to which they equate money with identity, with power as well, right? Those couples that had those open conversations, they tended to be happier as well. And for them, it tended to be the case that the inequity in earnings didn't really matter as much as in those where money was still kind of like a taboo, kind of like the elephant in the room, right? As so many people said to me. But who knows? I mean, I think this is going to be a trend that we continue to see. I should also say the first time I became aware of the data showing these heightened divorce rates in these inequitable couples was more than 10 years ago. I started doing some research on this. So this is something that hasn't really materially changed over the last decade. I think that especially considering that we are seeing some kind of backlash against women's rights in certain countries around the world, that we're seeing a widening of the gender pay gap in the US, for example, right? It's widened for 2 years consecutively. Data has just shown. I think considering all of that, that is only going to slow down the extent to which we see progress in this regard.
Advice to couples based on everything you've learned, everyone you've talked to who are both, earning and maybe in a situation where the husband could be seen as a, quote, trophy husband.
Talk about money. Maybe don't use the phrase trophy husband. I can imagine that might make people feel a little bit uncomfortable. But talk about money. And I think, honestly, I spoke to a lot of therapists. It sounds like therapists can do a lot of good in this regard. Go and see a marriage counselor if money is an issue in your marriage, if you feel emasculated, if you feel like you're not getting credit where credit's due, if you feel like there's a power imbalance, maybe talk to someone about it.
All right. Well, the article is called The Plight of the Trophy Husbands. You can read that in Business Insider, where Josie Cox is a contributor. Check out her book, Women, Money, Power. That's available wherever books are sold. Josie, I've enjoyed the chat. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
Doug. Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu? Is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.